The year was 2011, during the annual Shiloh convention hosted by Living Faith Church. It was supposed to be like every other night of intense worship, prayer, and prophetic declarations. But something happened on that altar that would shake Nigeria, generate heated arguments across social media, and place Bishop David Oyedepo at the center of national controversy. In the viral clip that circulated online, a young woman stepped forward during an altar call. When it was her turn to speak, she boldly declared that she was a witch for Jesus. Her statement immediately triggered a reaction that would spark nationwide debate. Oyedepo questioned her, and then, in an unexpected moment, slapped her. The clip lasted only a few seconds, but it was powerful enough to dominate public discourse for weeks. The video spread like wildfire. Nigeria is a deeply religious country, and anything that touches Christianity or the spiritual realm always carries emotional weight. Add to that the fact that Oyedepo is one of the most influential pastors in Africa, leading a church with millions of followers worldwide. People were stunned. Some were outraged, while others defended the act as spiritually justified. Many saw it as a clash between physical force and the practice of deliverance. Was this an act of spiritual warfare? Was it assault? Or was it simply the heightened intensity of a prophetic moment taking place in an environment known for strong deliverance encounters? From a broader perspective, this was one of the earliest Nigerian megachurch controversies to go viral in the age of social media. Platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter were becoming mainstream. Nigerians were getting phones with better cameras and faster internet access. And at that moment, the Shiloh 2011 clip became a symbol of how quickly religious events could be captured, shared, and debated in the new digital era. The altar call context: what actually happened? Before analyzing Oyedepo's reaction, it is important to understand the environment. Shiloh is not a casual church service. It is a highly charged spiritual program that draws hundreds of thousands of participants and millions of online viewers. Deliverance, prophetic instructions, and spiritual confrontations are normal features of such gatherings. On the night of the incident, Bishop Oyedepo made a specific call. His exact instruction was clear. If you're in any kind of witchcraft activity and you genuinely want deliverance, come out. The key phrase here is genuinely want deliverance. It was not an invitation for drama or debate. It was a moment intended for people who were seeking freedom from occult involvement. Many people came out, including the young woman. To avoid confusion, Oyedepo repeated the instruction again. He wanted to be sure that only those who sincerely desired deliverance remained in front. The woman stayed, which signaled to him, and to the crowd, that she was responding to the call. This is important because spiritual leaders often emphasize clarity during sensitive deliverance sessions. Maintaining order is crucial, both spiritually and physically. In a gathering of thousands, any form of disruption can throw the entire atmosphere into confusion. From an analytical standpoint, the environment itself contributed to what happened next. Shiloh is a place of heightened spiritual expectation. People believe they are encountering divine intervention. Emotions run high, faith is energized, and spiritual leaders act with boldness based on what they perceive in the moment. Understanding this context helps explain why Oyedepo reacted so sharply when the lady made her claim. The statement, "I am a witch for Jesus." When Oyedepo reached the woman and asked for her confession, she uttered the phrase that ignited the storm. "I am a witch for Jesus." To many Christians, this sounded like open heresy. The statement was not just theologically contradictory, it was spiritually inflammatory. Christianity teaches that light and darkness cannot mix. Jesus and witchcraft are not compatible. For the woman to combine both terms in one sentence sounded, to most observers, like deliberate mockery. Many pastors interpreted her words as a provocative act. Some believed she was intentionally trying to ridicule the spiritual exercise happening on stage. Others thought she was under a spiritual influence meant to cause confusion. And some suggested she may have been mentally unstable. This is where Oyedepo's now famous question came from. Jesus has no witches. Who are you? The statement, instead of clarifying anything, only deepened suspicion. And in that split second, Oyedepo responded physically, a reaction that many supporters viewed as part of a spiritual confrontation. From an analytical perspective, this moment raises several questions. Was the lady confused? Was she attempting to disrupt the event? Was she under the influence of a spiritual force that prompted her to speak that way? Or was she simply seeking attention in front of a massive audience? These questions became the foundation of the debates that followed. Some argued that she misunderstood the instructions. Others believed she intended to ridicule the entire deliverance process. Either way, the moment marked the beginning of a controversy that continues to be referenced many years later. The slap. Why he did it. To understand why Bishop Oyedepo reacted the way he did, we must first examine how he interpreted the young woman's statement. In the heat of a spiritual service, especially one centered on deliverance, every word, gesture, or confession is taken seriously. So when the lady declared that she was a witch for Jesus, Oyedepo did not hear it as a confused remark. He heard it as an act of defiance. In his view, the young woman was mocking the Christian faith itself. The phrase appeared designed to insult the doctrine he was preaching and to ridicule the sacredness of the altar. To a pastor leading a high-tension service of deliverance, mockery is not a small matter. It is seen as an attempt by the forces of darkness to disrupt the spiritual atmosphere. Second, he perceived her statement as a deliberate interruption of a moment meant for those genuinely seeking deliverance. The instruction he gave earlier was clear. Anyone standing at the altar should be someone who sincerely wanted freedom from occult practices. Her declaration signaled the opposite. Instead of coming for deliverance, she seemed to be turning the moment into a spectacle. Third, many believers interpret such confrontations as spiritual warfare. Pastors often act swiftly when they believe that a demonic or deceptive manifestation is unfolding. According to many church members who defended Oyedepo, the slap was not a physical attack but a symbolic act of authority, a forceful rejection of what they believed was a demonic utterance. His reaction was immediate and clearly unplanned. There was no pause for reflection, no attempt to call an usher or counselor. It was instinctive. Supporters argued that in deliverance settings, spiritual leaders often respond to perceived demonic provocations with sudden actions, sometimes physical in nature. This is where cultural context becomes important. Within Nigerian Pentecostalism, especially in highly charismatic environments, spiritual authority is sometimes expressed physically. Deliverance sessions can involve pushing, tapping, laying on of hands, or other physical gestures believed to carry spiritual power. To many Nigerian Christians, Oyedepo's action was simply another expression of spiritual discipline. To others, however, the slap crossed a boundary. But to his followers, it was a defense of doctrine. They believed he was protecting the integrity of the altar, rejecting a statement they considered blasphemous, and acting as a shepherd defending his flock from what looked like spiritual contamination. From an analytical perspective, this moment reveals how Nigerian Pentecostal culture sometimes blurs the lines between spiritual authority and physical action. What may be deemed assault in a legal or secular context can be interpreted as spiritual warfare within the religious environment. Public backlash and massive social media uproar. Once the video leaked, the controversy took on a life of its own. It swept across Facebook, Twitter, online forums, blogs, and even radio talk shows. Millions of Nigerians who did not attend Shiloh 2011 were now watching the scene through their screens, each person forming an opinion based on a few seconds of footage. The younger generation, more exposed to global culture and more skeptical of unquestioned religious authority, reacted strongly. They questioned whether the act was an abuse of power. They asked whether the church had gone too far by normalizing violence in the name of spirituality. For them, it was time to ask hard questions. Should a pastor ever lay hands on someone in a physically violent manner? Can spiritual authority justify physical force? Does a church altar place leaders above the law? On the other hand, millions of Oyedepo supporters came out in full defense. They insisted that the woman's statement was a demonic provocation and that the slap was a spiritual act. Many argued that Christian scriptures show instances where Jesus and the apostles confronted demonic spirits with drastic action, and this was no different. This split in public reaction became one of the earliest examples of how social media could amplify a religious incident in Nigeria. Before this era, controversies around men of God rarely escalated beyond newspapers or television interviews. But now, with short videos rapidly going viral, the entire nation could participate in real-time judgment. The 2011 controversy also set the stage for how future religious scandals would unfold online. People learned that a few seconds of footage could define a pastor's public image. Churches learned that cameras were everywhere. And Nigerians, for the first time, saw the possibility of holding religious leaders accountable through digital exposure. It was more than a slap. It was a cultural shockwave that revealed a generational divide about faith, power, and the limits of spiritual authority. The court case. What really happened? Following the online uproar, a Lagos-based lawyer announced a lawsuit on behalf of the young woman. The legal claims included assault, emotional trauma, and violation of her fundamental rights. The lawyer argued that Oyedepo's action was unlawful and that the dignity of the young woman had been violated in front of thousands of people. But from the very beginning, something about the case seemed uncertain. The alleged victim never stepped forward publicly. She never granted interviews, never appeared in court, and never confirmed her involvement. Every statement came from the lawyer alone. The case stalled almost immediately. There was no medical report filed. No official complaint from the woman herself. No video evidence apart from the online clip. And no witnesses presented before the court. Several factors contributed to the case failing to progress. First, without the victim's direct participation, the lawsuit could not stand. Nigerian courts require the complainant to present evidence personally or through sworn testimony. Second, there were rumors, though never confirmed, that the woman may have withdrawn or refused to be involved from the beginning. Third, there was no substantial evidence proving physical harm or trauma. The slap was visible, but legally, the absence of injury made it harder to pursue damages. Some speculated that a private settlement may have occurred, but no verifiable proof ever emerged. Others argued that the immense social and political influence of Bishop Oyedepo made pursuing the case difficult. In Nigeria's religious landscape, taking a high-profile pastor to court is often seen as challenging, expensive, and socially risky. Ultimately, the legal challenge dissolved quietly. No judgment was issued. No prosecution occurred. And no follow-up ever resurfaced. This incident demonstrated how difficult it can be to legally confront powerful religious leaders in Nigeria. It exposed the gap between public outrage and legal reality. And it confirmed that without strong evidence and the direct involvement of the victim, even the most viral controversies may never see the inside of a courtroom. Why Oyedepo faced no consequences. Looking back at the Shiloh 2011 incident, one question always resurfaces. Why did Bishop David Oyedepo face no legal or institutional consequences? The answer lies in a combination of influence, culture, perception, and legal realities within Nigeria. First, there is the issue of massive institutional influence. Bishop Oyedepo is not just a pastor. He leads one of the largest Pentecostal movements in the world. The Living Faith Church network, its schools, its media presence, and its millions of dedicated followers create an ecosystem of loyalty and protection. When controversies arise, this institutional strength acts as a buffer against external pressure. Second, Nigeria is a society that deeply respects religious authority. Pastors, especially founders of megachurches, are viewed with a kind of reverence rarely seen in secular environments. Many Nigerians believe that spiritual leaders operate under divine mandate and therefore deserve a degree of immunity from public criticism. In such a culture, challenging a pastor is often interpreted as challenging God. Third, many people saw the slap through the lens of spiritual justification. To a significant portion of Nigerian Christians, deliverance is a real and sometimes violent struggle. The idea of confronting demonic forces physically is not foreign within Pentecostal practice. So, for those who believed the woman was mocking the faith or showing signs of possession, Oyedepo's reaction seemed not only acceptable but expected. Fourth, public opinion, though divided, remained largely supportive. Many felt sympathy for the lady, but far more people believed Oyedepo acted to defend the sanctity of the altar. In controversies involving religious figures, perception often matters more than fact. And in this case, popular sentiment leaned in his favor. Finally, the most important factor, there was no complainant. Without the woman stepping forward, without her submitting a statement, without medical evidence, and without witnesses willing to testify, the case had no legal foundation. Nigerian law requires the victim to participate directly. Without her involvement, no prosecution could move forward. The court cannot enforce justice on behalf of someone who is absent, silent, or uninterested. Analytically, this situation reveals a deeper pattern. Nigeria's legal system rarely pursues high-profile religious cases when the alleged victim refuses to cooperate. The law depends on evidence, not public outrage. And in the absence of a complainant, everything collapses into speculation, debate, and unfinished narratives. Interpretations. 3 possible views. Over the years, 3 major interpretations of the Shiloh 2011 incident have emerged. Each one reflects different worldviews, different theological assumptions, and different cultural expectations. Understanding them helps us see why the debate never ends. The first interpretation is the spiritual warfare interpretation. Those who support this view believe the young woman was either possessed or intentionally mocking the Christian faith. In this perspective, her statement was not a joke or confusion, It was a demonic provocation. According to this group, Oyedepo's response was an exercise of spiritual authority, a forceful rejection of darkness. They see the slap not as assault but as a symbolic strike against evil. The second interpretation is the abuse of power perspective. Critics argue that Oyedepo overreacted and misused his influence. To them, slapping a worshipper in front of a global audience is unjustifiable under any circumstances. They believe Pentecostal leaders often hide behind the language of deliverance to justify acts that would be unacceptable elsewhere. This group sees the incident as evidence of authoritarian tendencies within some megachurch systems. The third interpretation falls in the middle, the theater and miscommunication perspective. Here, the argument is that Shiloh is a high-tension, emotionally charged environment. People are crying, praying, shouting, and seeking spiritual breakthroughs. In such an atmosphere, misunderstandings are common. According to this view, the young woman's statement may have been a poorly phrased attempt at expressing confusion or personal struggle. And Oyedepo's reaction may have been a spontaneous impulse shaped by the pressure of the moment rather than calculated aggression. From an analytical standpoint, the truth likely lies somewhere between spiritual conviction and human impulse. The event sits at the intersection of religion, culture, and psychology. It cannot be understood purely through spiritual reasoning or purely through secular analysis. It is a collision of both worlds, which is why it continues to generate debate more than a decade later. Impact on Oyedepo's image. Interestingly, the Shiloh 2011 slap did not weaken Bishop Oyedepo's ministry. Instead, it seemed to deepen the divide between his supporters and his critics. For his followers, the incident strengthened his image as a bold, uncompromising defender of the faith. They saw him as someone who does not tolerate mockery of the gospel and who stands firm in moments of spiritual confrontation. Within living faith circles, the event is often remembered as a show of authority rather than a scandal. But critics viewed it entirely differently. For them, it became Exhibit A of what they consider excessive control, authoritarian leadership, and the dangers of unchecked spiritual power. It remains one of the most referenced controversies whenever Oyedepo is discussed in public forums, especially among those skeptical of megachurch structures. Despite this division, the Winners Chapel brand remained intact. Its growth continued. Its followers remained loyal. Covenant University, Landmark University, and other institutions under the ministry kept expanding. The ministry's media presence remained powerful. This resilience reveals a key truth. Religious loyalty in Nigeria is strong enough to withstand public scandals. Followers tend to trust their pastors more than the opinions of outsiders. And for many, spiritual performance and perceived anointing matter far more than public image. Thus, while the event made headlines, it did not significantly damage Oyedepo's standing among those who matter most to his ministry, his congregation. Why this story still returns today. More than a decade has passed since the Shiloh 2011 incident, yet it keeps resurfacing every time Bishop Oyedepo trends online. Why does this particular moment refuse to fade? First, it represents an ongoing debate between Pentecostal authority and human rights. In Nigeria, the tension between spiritual leadership and personal liberty remains unresolved. The slap is often cited as a symbol of that tension. Second, the story highlights the cultural power of megachurch leaders. In a nation where religious institutions hold enormous influence, incidents involving pastors create long-lasting impressions. The conversation around the slap is really a conversation about power dynamics in the church. Third, the incident reflects a broader generational divide. Older Christians tend to see spiritual authority as unquestionably valid. Younger Nigerians, shaped by social media and global culture, are more critical and demand accountability. Finally, the story returns because it sits at the crossroads of faith, controversy, leadership, and national psychology. It forces Nigerians to confront uncomfortable questions about belief, authority, and the limits of human behavior in religious spaces. And so, the incident persists, not just as a viral video, but as a cultural mirror. It continues to shape conversations about how far spiritual leaders should go, what is acceptable on the altar, and how Nigerians navigate the complex boundary between faith and personal rights. The slap at Shiloh 2011 was more than a moment. It became a symbol, a flashpoint, a debate that may continue for years to come.